All right. Gary, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Let's get started. So this is Armin from Atheist Republic, and we are with
Gary McLelland from the International Humanist and Ethical Union.
All right, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and what your organization does?
Sure. So my name is Gary. I'm the Chief Executive of the International Humanist and Ethical Union, or the IHEU for short. We are the worldwide democratic body for atheist, humanist and non-religious organisations. So we have around about 160 non-religious organisations which are members in about 70 countries around the world. So we provide a platform for democratic debate for these organisations to get together, and we also represent them around the world at various institutions.
So can you tell us exactly like what does that involve? Like, for example, one thing I want to let people know is that when the Atheist Republic consulate members in Kuala Lumpur were in trouble when they had a gathering and they just got together, just having fun and just meeting other atheists around them. And what happened is that they took a picture. And this is in Malaysia. Malaysia is supposed to be a moderate Islamic country, but then that picture went viral. A whole bunch of Muslims in Malaysia were very angry. How could atheists even exist apparently in Malaysia? Apparently we don't even have the right to exist. But then the picture went viral, and a lot of people were threatened by a bunch of atheists just meeting with each other and having some drinks. And even the deputy minister, right, he came out and he said that we need to hunt down these atheists. And this was something that your organization was the first, I think the only human rights organization out there that went out and tried to protect these atheists, tried to become their voice. And you guys even took it to the United Nations Human Rights Council. I didn't even know that you could bring up atheism in the United Nations and atheists. Was that one of the first times that the atheists were being mentioned as a group of people that need to be protected under the Human Rights Council, or was it done before?
It's been done before. So as you say, we have accreditation at the United Nations and the Human Rights Council in Geneva, but also for the General Assembly in New York and various other bodies. And since 1952, we have been the voice of the non-religious at the United Nations. So we very regularly raise issues related to atheist, apostate rights and so on at the United Nations. But as you say, we were very pleased to be able to help raise the issue of the Atheist Republic consulate in Malaysia. I mean, it was obviously shocking language that was used by the Malaysian government, as you say, threatening to hunt down atheists.
But okay, so this the issue is that if this was about any other minority group, right? Like if they said that we need to hunt down the Jews, or we need to hunt down the Muslims, or we need to hunt down the Christians, I think the whole world would be talking about that. I mean, every decent human rights group would be making this one of their main agenda. But when it came to atheists, I mean, it did get covered in the news, mostly thanks to you guys. But you were the only organization that was even paying attention to this. Why do you think that it seems like not that many people give a shit when atheists start being wrong? Like, we're not saying that. I mean, I'm not suggesting that when somebody says that we need to hunt down Muslims or Jews or Christians, that should be ignored. But why? Obviously, they get a lot of attention, and rightfully so. But why is it that when somebody from the government of a very advanced country like this is Malaysia, this is not Saudi Arabia, this is not Pakistan, this is not Bangladesh, says we need to hunt down atheists, why doesn't it get the same level of attention?
You're right, it is a very strange thing. I've raised this many times before. For some reason, and I can't say exactly why it is, but I can give you some of my thoughts behind it. Politicians around the world, media figures around the world have taken the view that atheism is somehow problematic, it's somehow taboo in some way, that atheists are, well, even the language that people use is that it's an anti-state activity, or that it's somehow, trying to challenge the authority of the government by simply following your own beliefs. So people have got this idea in their head that atheists are this kind of radical group of people that have this kind of unusual agenda, whereas in actual fact what we've been trying to point out since 1952 and since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is that people have the right to freedom of religion or belief, to manifest their beliefs in whatever way they are, even including non-religious beliefs. So it is a very strange thing, and we are part of a process, for example, at the European Parliament, of what's called interreligious dialogue. So the European Parliament has one of its mandates, one of its requirements, is that it has to have regular dialogue with religious leaders. And for a long, long time, non-religious communities had to fight for the right to be accepted into that and to be given a voice with politicians in the same way as people who have religious beliefs, which is a very strange thing. So there's this general feeling and fear that political leaders and sort of societies around the world have about non-religious people, and it's a very unusual taboo to have.
It's very interesting with this idea that they think we're anti other group of people, because we are only anti other views or other belief. It comes with the degree with the doctrine of other religions. The hatred for other groups of people, like atheism is a lack of belief in God, and that's about it. But Islam comes with a lot of hatred for within their own scripture for Jews and members of and pagans and atheists. Christianity comes with its doctrine comes for with eternal torture for people that are not Christian. Atheists don't have anything in their doctrine that is anti-Christians. Maybe anti-theists like like myself, we're anti-Christianity, we're anti-Islam, but we're not anti-Christian or anti-Muslim, right? But the interesting is that from all these, among all these groups of people, the one group of people that they're thinking is the most anti-other group of people is the one that doesn't have a doctrine that specifies anything against other group of people. But to make it put it in context to how bad this is, when somebody from the government of Malaysia comes and says we need to hunt down the atheists, the comparison I give is that even in a country as bad as Saudi Arabia or Iran, okay. Even with the level of discrimination against Christians and Jews that exist in countries like this, no government official will ever come out and publicly say that we need to hunt down the Christians or Jews. Like, no government officials in Iran might have a lot of policies that is anti-Christian or anti-Baha'i or anti-Jewish, like, right? But they would not dare publicly say, we need to hunt down the Jews. That would be crossing a line in Iran or Saudi Arabia, right? But obviously, Saudi Arabia would say, well, terrorism, atheism is terrorism. Like, all atheists are terrorists. So atheists are fair game, but Jews and Christians are not, or even enjoy some level of protection. Not obviously, I'm not saying that the shit that they're dealing with is not a lot in Saudi Arabia.
No, of course,
it's bad. But I'm saying when it comes to atheists, it's just do whatever, we'll do it. And I think the main reason for that is that we don't have as people like you and your organization that protect atheists are not as powerful or as big as the organizations that protect Christians and Jews. Like, we don't have that loud of a voice, which is very surprising because there's a shit ton of us out there.
That's right.
And we need to do a better job at getting. Let's give credit where credit is due. The Jews and the Christians and the Muslims, and they've done a good job at getting together and be like, hey, we need to protect each other. I think we are a little bit behind on the game, and I think the reason why we're behind on the game is because a lot of atheists also have this false sense of who the hell are we anyways? Like, we don't need, we're just atheists. We don't need protection. We're not a group. We're not. But given that it's so easy to discriminate against us without any protection, I think this shows that we do need to get each other and maybe support organizations like I actually can you let people know again, for people that just joined us, what is your organization and where can they find you?
Sure. So the organization is the International Humanist and Ethical Union. Our website is IHEU.org. Right. So the name is a bit of a mouthful, International Humanist and Ethical Union, because the organization was formed in 1952, and presumably that was a good name in 1952. But that's a bit old-fashioned now, perhaps. Right. And we will be rebranding in January, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Good. But just to come back on some of the things you said there, Armin, I think you're totally right. I think part of this is that I think as non-religious people, we have to remember as well that, you know, only maybe even in North America or Europe, even 100, 200 years ago, for us to sort of exist and to have this conversation in public about being an atheist and being non-religious would be very difficult, if not downright dangerous. You know, so we've come from a position of 300 years. So I come from Scotland. About 300 years ago, we hanged a student at University of Edinburgh because he didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God. He believed that Jesus was, quote, a magician, and he was hanged by the authorities of the church. I think it was 1697. His name was Thomas Aikenhead.
By the mob or by the government?
Oh no, he was. So back then Scotland was basically a theocracy. The church controlled a third of the seats in Parliament, and so he was tried in a court. He was found guilty of blasphemy, and the Church of Scotland, which is the national church, wrote to say that he should be, quote, vigorously executed to curb the impiety across the country. And so, yeah, in I think 1697, he was executed for blasphemy. That was a 20-year-old medical student. So to go from that, where we were 300 years ago, to now, where, you know, we have representation at the United Nations, we have, you know, several world leaders who are outwardly atheist. We have, you know, in many European countries and even across a lot of North America and beyond, we have populations which are largely non-religious. I think we've come a long way, you know, but it's obvious that, as you say, our voices are not as strong as the religious lobbies. And I think what you say is very right. You know, the situation for Christians in Iraq and various places around the world and other religious minorities is shocking. And one of the things that we like to do with religious groups at the United Nations is to join and support some of their statements. You know, so there's an organisation called Christian Solidarity Worldwide. We like to make a point to sort of support their statements because we want to show that as atheists and non-religious people, as humanists, that we want to live in a secular world where everybody has the right to believe what they want, and that, you know, we find a good way to have these public conversations. So I think that's true. And I think one thing that's also true is I haven't really thought this one out in a sophisticated way, so I'll just sort of think out loud. I think that although there is a lot of dedicated atheist, humanist, secular activists and so on, the level of dedication of the average humanist, secular person is probably a lot lower than the average dedication of a religious person. You know, if you believe that
dedication, you mean to their group, you mean, like not
to the belief system,
not to, I mean, to the belief system or to the lack of belief system, but
exactly,
because not to the dedication to everything, you mean just specifically?
No, okay, just to that particular philosophy. So for example, if you're an atheist, you probably don't spend much time thinking about your atheism, and it probably doesn't, it might, but it might not influence your worldview. Whereas unless you're in a very religious area, then you're thinking about it all the time. Because, I'm sure.
Because religion is forced on you all the time.
Absolutely.
I guess the problem with the problem is that the atheists that don't have the luxury of not having to think about their atheism because the religion is not forced down on them. Those are the those are the atheists that are in the position to help atheists worldwide. More the atheists that are motivated to fight against this injustice are mostly atheists that live in places where they don't have that much freedom to say whatever they want, and they're not in a, so what we need to do is make the atheists that don't think about their atheism much start caring about atheists that don't have that luxury. I mean, a lot of atheists actually come to me and like, you know what, I'm an atheist, but I don't really think about these things much. Like, if I left religion, I don't think about religion. Like, good. We're trying to make it so that other atheists have the luxury of not having to think about religion. As an atheist activist, we want more atheists to have that luxury. But okay. So I think.
Can I just, sorry, I was going to say one thing on that point. I think that's what we try to do at the IHEU is we're trying to create this sense of a global community, because I think, so my experience growing up in Britain is that I was raised in a Catholic, so my family were Irish, and I was raised in a sort of Irish Catholic background, went to Catholic schools, was taught mostly about the Catholic faith and so on. So I was in my teenage years before I became an atheist, before I had the opportunity to read about philosophy and atheism and so on and so forth. And that had quite a big effect on me. And I think it's kind of important to think about the kind of context that it comes from. And I think I agree with you about the need to recognise that in these Western countries where we can sort of talk about our atheism and be non-religious, it's important to acknowledge the kind of the luck that we have in society. And I think that's what we're trying to do, to have this global sense of community where we can realise that, okay, for us, atheism and humanism might be about reading books, it might be about watching YouTube videos, it might be about fighting about increasing the secularism of your country and changing the education codes or whatever. But in countries like Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, all these other places, it's a matter of life and death, and atheists in that country are made invisible by their governments. They are rendered, in some cases their status is illegal, so there's a few countries in the world where it's illegal to be an atheist. It's so profoundly sort of dark ages. So yeah.
So Jim in the live chat is saying, by the way, I should have invited Jim to this live chat. I totally forgot. Jim is saying, because we've been dehumanized by people that think their belief gives them superiority. And then he also has, I get accused of being a fake atheist because I studied the Bible, but they don't understand how much effort and emotional drainage I sacrifice in order to escape indoctrination. So here's the thing. A lot of people say, you know what, this seems like very tribal because you're going to try to protect your fellow atheists just because you're an atheist. Why is that? Why would you do that, right? But the truth is that what we're saying is that you don't have to even be atheist to care about this. If you look at it, this is one of the least protected groups in the world. This is one of the groups of people that if they're wrong somewhere or if they're discriminated against somewhere, it gets ignored. There's very little organizations or communities or groups of people actively, like the way you guys are doing it, going out and trying to protect these people, like in a very, I'm not talking about like just like talking about it on social media, like Atheist Republic just posting an article, oh look at this. I'm talking about the kind of stuff that you guys do. You guys like have, I don't know, lawyers, you could take these stuff to make cases, you write reports, you take it to the United Nations, that kind of stuff. And this is needed, and I don't think I mean, you know how in the example I usually give is like, the gay rights movement, right? Not when we had in the 1960s and 70s in the United States and European countries, just because you're gay doesn't mean you're part of the gay rights movement, right? You might be gay and not give a shit, and you're not part of the movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just because you're straight doesn't mean that you're not part of the movement.
Exactly.
Right? You
exactly.
could be
Yeah.
straight and you could be part of the gay rights movement. And I'm saying, like, when it comes to the atheist rights movement, this is not a tribal thing. Somebody could be a Christian or a Muslim, and we could disagree with their ideology as much as we want. But as much as we disagree with that on them, they might see eye to eye with us on the fact that, okay, this is fucked up. What the hell? Like, why is it okay for governments to do stuff to their own citizens for the lack of belief, and there doesn't seem to be much attention to it? So you could be a Christian that is part of the atheist right movement. You could be a Muslim that is part of the atheist right movement. Again, you don't have to stop disagreeing with people to appreciate their help and acknowledge them as part of the movement. So it is not at all a tribal thing. What do you think about that?
I totally agree with you. To illuminate, to add to that as well, I would say we have a kind of quote on our website, which is our sort of mission statement, which I think summarizes that issue quite well. So what we say is, we want everyone to live a life of dignity in a world where universal human rights are respected and protected, and where states uphold secularism. We work to build, support and represent the global humanist movement, defending human rights, particularly those of non-religious people, and promoting humanist views worldwide. And I think for me that gets the balance of we support integrated human rights, all human rights for everybody. But just as there's many very good organisations working on freedom of expression, working on racism, working on gender and sexual discrimination, we are the organisation that works on freedom of expression and freedom of thought for atheists. You know, we are just the people that do that. And you know, in order for us to achieve human rights for everybody, we have to get all the little bits of that delicate jigsaw together. And an important part of it is the right to freedom of expression for non-religious people. And the example that I always use to try and help convince people who are religious that they should be supporting us is the issue of blasphemy. So we make a big issue of blasphemy for the right, you know, because of the effect it has on atheists, apostates, on reformers, even on, you know, liberal religious people. But in actual fact, it has a big impact on Christians in Pakistan, as we've seen from the Asia Bibi case. And no matter what angle you look at blasphemy from, if you're a religious person or if you're an atheist or if you're an innocent bystander, there is no way to see blasphemy laws as other than really bad laws, and they're bad for everybody.
But what do you think about this? This is just a hypothesis. You tell me what you think, because I think if you could get freedom of expression, because we're at the bottom of the list on average internationally when it comes to protection, on average. I know it's different everywhere else. Like, there is no other groups of people that 13 countries have a death penalty for, right? 13 like, so we're very, very low. We score very low when it comes to being protected, but protecting atheists' freedom of speech and expression and letting them get away with saying what they want helps everybody else. Because if you manage in a country where atheists, there's no blasphemy laws against atheists, like in a Muslim, Christians would be able to get away with saying whatever they want as well. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
If you go with the group, if you try to protect the most hated group and let them attack any religion or say whatever they want or say they don't believe in things, then the religious minority groups in that country will also be able to get away. It's like a rising tide that lifts all boats, right? Like,
exactly.
Right. So, one thing. So, do you think in Islamic countries, like you mentioned, that we came a long way, but in a more recent trend, this is very recent, it seems like we're going backwards in many places. It seems like in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Turkey, in Bangladesh. It seems like we're in Egypt. It seems like when it comes to protecting atheists, we're going the other way around, and things are getting worse. Is that the sense that you're getting?
I mean, I would say there's maybe two things I would say about that. One is to agree with you in the sense that things are getting worse. I would say obviously we've seen an increase in the level of rhetoric. First of all, I would say the pro-Islamist rhetoric, which also often goes hand in hand with anti-atheist rhetoric in a lot of Middle Eastern countries and South Asian countries. We've seen, for example, I was in India this year in January, where we have around about 20 organisations in India, which is it's a very interesting country, India, to illuminate the issue of historical atheism in non-Western societies, because a lot of people think it's a Western thing that's been sort of exported around the world. Anyway, to leave that aside for a moment, we have, as we've seen, so I think there's been 5 or 6 atheist, humanist people murdered in India over the past few years. So we have seen a rise in the targeted, and when we launched our report last year, which is a kind of snapshot of the rights of the non-religious, we said very clearly that there was in 2017 a very particular phenomenon of targeted violence against non-religious activists, which was very concerning. So I would certainly agree with you that in the past few years, and I think to say it probably goes hand in hand, or at least is concurrent with the rise in nationalism and the rise in sort of divisive politics that we've seen around the world, with politics becoming much more polarized and group identities becoming much more important, and the fighting that there ensues. But maybe to be optimistic, I would say that if you expand the scope, the lens a little bit in terms of the time frame we're looking at here, we also see societies a lot more open than they have been before. Think about the Arab Strip. We can talk for hours about the effect or not of the Arab Spring, but these events and this massive influx and exchange of information, I think, has led to, for example, I mean, maybe it would have been impossible to imagine a Malaysian Atheist Republic consulate existing 20 years ago, whereas now, I mean, I don't know.
No, I think it's Malaysia used to not give a shit about these things until, I mean, it's becoming very, like, even in work areas, like, they're separate, like men and women used to be able to work with each other side by side, and now a lot of companies are separating them. Is I don't know, I mean, I need to get somebody from Malaysia on the show at some point to tell us what's going on. I mean, in Egypt, after Arab Spring, okay, even after Arab Spring in Egypt, atheism wasn't illegal in Egypt unless you came out and shit on Islam publicly. You could have been atheist, right? But now atheism is illegal. Just being an atheist is illegal in Egypt, and this is in a country where Islamism was not rising. In fact, Islamism was being crushed, like Islamist groups are being crushed, and still they managed to come out and say, like, hey, by the way, we're going to make atheism illegal. Like, I don't understand, but I agree with you that this is like more of a, I don't know, 5 or 10 year trend. And if you look at it, if you go just a little bit, expand the time frame you're looking at, it's going to look a lot better. But this is past few years, it's been like really, it seems like everywhere is getting worse. I'm not sure why that is. So here's one other thing I wanted to. You mentioned your rebranding, and you have the word humanist in your branding. What are your? We talked about it a little bit before we're going on air. What do you think about using? A lot of people think that using the word atheist is not a good idea because it's so demonized and it's so looked down upon that it's going to work against making people accept that. And I completely disagree with that. But what are your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts are, so we had a small discussion and then we stopped it. But basically, I think you said to me something like it's important to use the word atheist to remove the stigma that's attached to it in countries, and I do completely agree with that. I think like that's a very important thing to do, to reclaim that label and to make sure that it's not, for example, in Saudi Arabia, that term is now synonymous with terrorism. Yeah. And it's really important that we kind of put some energy to making sure that people understand that that's not true. Right. So I do see the point, and we also make we do make a big point of using the word atheist. So we talk about atheist rights. You know, we've done some work with you in the past, social media stuff. We interviewed you, I think, as well, actually, for our Facebook page. I just remembered. So that's an important thing. But the other thing I would say is that because we have a global span, and for many sort of European or North American countries and members that we have, atheism just isn't really an issue. Like they would not use the term atheist because they wouldn't describe themselves as being not religious, you know, so they would see that as defining yourself against being a religious person. And the theory behind humanism is it's a positive philosophy, which, although I mean, I think all humanists would be atheists. 99.9% of people who say they're humanists, I imagine, would also say they're atheists.
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
What they're talking about there is they're talking about a philosophy which, you know, it's almost like atheism is a consequence of your humanism, because you believe in a natural view of the world. You believe in science and reason. You want to use logic and compassion and empathy to build a better world. And atheism is one of the components in that, if you see what I mean.
Well, I mean, I don't think it is, because it's possible for you to be a Christian and a humanist at the same time. It is. I mean,
I'm not sure. So
I mean,
sorry.
No, but I'm saying what gets you in trouble, what we're trying to focus on and help people that are in trouble, right? And it's not your humanism that is getting you in trouble. Like,
no.
It's your atheism that is getting you in trouble, right? Like, you could totally be, you could go around in Iran or Saudi Arabia like, hey, I'm a humanist, and nobody gives a shit. But but try saying openly saying, hey, I'm an atheist, right? I'm an Iranian atheist. That's when the problem comes in, right? So, I mean, atheism doesn't always lead to humanism, right? But and humanism doesn't always lead to atheism.
I think I would disagree with you slightly. Well, I would disagree with you there, I would say, because so the term humanism has been used in the past, like during the kind of European Renaissance period, to talk about sort of a general humanitarianism, a sort of approach to philosophy and academia, but since 1952, the word humanism as we use it has been very clearly used to define a non-religious worldview. So I know, for example, in America, there's like groups of, I think there's some groups of Christians and Jews which call themselves humanists. But I mean, I don't want to get into sort of people's front of Judea stuff here, but like they wouldn't be members of our organization, and the way they use the word humanism isn't used by the majority of people who use that word. You know, the majority of people who use the word humanist in the context of the English language are talking about a non-religious worldview based on reason and logic and science and so on. Right. So, but I understand what your point there about you know, the sharp edge of what we're talking about here is people who are atheists and people who are atheists in high control religious societies, and I'm not shying away from that point at all.
No, you guys are not. I completely like not. You are not, and you. I was surprised that as an organization as big as reputable as yours was like using it so without any apology, protecting it. So I was very happy, and I'm not saying I see the strategic reason behind using the word humanism, right? Like I understand that, for example, if you're especially like even if you are one of the people that is specifically being targeted for your atheism, you might want to strategically use other words that is not as hated, just so that you could like maybe go under the radar and create groups. But when able, we want to get to the heart of it, at exactly what it is that people hate on us. And you know, using the word humanism is because atheism is very demonized, but the thing is that, well, why is atheism demonized? It shouldn't be demonized, and that's why some of us want to just own it. And I see the point of using both of those, you know. And another thing is that a lot of people suggest that, oh, atheism leads you to better worldviews and this and that, and a lot of times it does, but sometimes it doesn't, and we do have a lot of examples of atheists that do believe in ridiculous things, right? Like we do have atheists that are not very nice, but also atheists that are nice people, but are not. They have some other crazy ideas, like, I mean, they lack belief in God, but they believe in conspiracy theories or ghosts or palm reading or whatever. The point about protecting atheists as a human rights movement is not to just protect the ones that we agree with, right? We believe that nobody should be discriminated against because they're atheists, even if we don't like them, even if they're people that have other ridiculous views, even if their atheism didn't lead to humanist views or skepticism or scientific worldviews, or like they just don't believe in God. We think if they are targeted because they don't believe in God, no matter how much we disagree with this specific atheist, we want to protect that atheist because they're like, no, you don't get to do that to them just because they don't believe in God. So that's why I really want to focus on, I really want to get into the heart of like not believing in God and basically atheism, not just a positive thing, your lack of belief, the negative one, your lack of belief in something shouldn't make you a target.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think to go back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, that is part of the reason why people have this idea. People have this idea that atheists are nihilistic, people who, lack morality. And I think that's partly the reason why people have, the lack of inclusion of atheists in all the normal human rights discourse.
Right. Can I bring this report that you? I'm going to show this report. I'm going to put this on the screen.
Sure.
Can you tell? Let me just make sure I have it here first before we talk about it properly. I want to see if we could. Oh, sure. Small. Just look at the screen smaller. Okay. Yeah. What are we looking at here?
Okay. I can't see what's on your screen, but I can tell you about the report.
Right. What I'm showing on the screen is the map with the colors and stuff. Yeah, they're red and orange. Yeah.
So basically, we have the map of the world. This is the Freedom of Thought report. So basically, this is a report that we have been doing for the past 6 years. Originally, it was only covering certain countries, but since I think 2013, it's covered every country in the world except. We don't include the Vatican because we don't consider it to be a country, and we do include Taiwan, which has upset China and led to some trouble for us at the United Nations, but that's a whole different conversation. So basically what we try to do is we run reports on every country in the world, and we try to rate them according to different thematic strands. So there's 4 themes that we use. The first is the constitution and government. So that's mainly to do with, how secular is the country? Does it have separation of church and state? Does it, for example, I'm in London in the United Kingdom. We have bishops in the House of Lords. The House of Lords is the unelected upper house of Parliament. So we have a whole series of bishops, which is a very, very unusual and anti-secular situation. The next theme after constitution and government is education and children's rights. So that's looking at things like religious schools, state funding for religious schools. So, for example, I know that one of the things we might talk about.
So before you continue, the name of it is the Freedom of Thought report. By the way, for the people that will be listening to this on the Atheist Republic podcast, we're gonna describe it so that I know you can't see it. So.
Of course.
Okay. So sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, the Freedom of Thought report. So the first one, constitution and government, about secularism and separation of church and state. The second theme we do is education and children's rights. So this looks at things like state funding of religious schools, mandatory religious instruction, religious education classes, and so on. An area where Canada scores very poorly, I have to say, but I'm sure we'll come back to that.
Yeah, because I'm surprised that Canada looks worse than the United States here. This is very surprising. Okay, go on.
The third theme is society, community, and family values. So in here, there's a whole bunch of stuff about legal rights and so on, but also things like how what's the social stigma and discrimination, which is a much harder thing to measure. And the fourth and final value is freedom of expression and advocacy of human values. So basically, this is how free are you to espouse your atheist, humanist values and views within the laws and so on. And for the people who can see it, the map which you're looking at, basically it's a map of the world, and different countries have different colours. So the redder the colour, the worse the score is, and the greener the colour, the better the score is. So you can see, for example, Russia is obviously kind of fairly red, along with a lot of Middle Eastern, North African countries.
So the worst, it seems like the 4 worst ones are Iran, Saudi Arabia, actually there's more, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sudan, and I'm pretty sure, North Korea. Wow, I'm surprised. Is that Indonesia that is so dark?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Didn't expect Indonesia to be as bad as. Is that as
we
bad?
Have
yeah. Go on.
The top the top 10 in terms of worst, or the bottom 10, I guess you could call it. But so that the worst 10 countries to be an atheist, according to us, is Saudi Arabia, Iran, Afghanistan, the Maldives, which often surprises people. Yeah. Pakistan, United Arab Emirates, Mauritania, Malaysia, and Sudan.
Wow, United Arab Emirates, really?
Yes.
I was just told recently by an atheist in Dubai that, you can be an atheist here, no problem.
So we have heard a couple of these stories. I mean, so here's one thing to preface this thing, because we've been publishing this report for 8 years, but this year was the first time that we included the ranking from the best to the worst, and we had a lot of very friendly and critical feedback, to put it mildly. So one thing to say is that this report draws most of the data from the law and policy, so from what is actually written and from what's the law is according to the government. Now, we know that in many countries the law and the reality can be two different things, and we also know that, for example, many countries will have in their constitution, like Russia, for example, has constitutional safeguards for freedom of expression, but we know that the policies of Russia are not to honour those. So what we try to do is to take as the base point the law and policy of the particular country, and then we try to, by getting volunteer researchers in the countries, we try to sort of tweak the scores a little bit to add in the qualitative data of, well, actually, the law says this, but actually what happens is this.
So basically what you're saying is that in some countries the lived experience is better than what they have written in their laws, right? So it's not, and in some countries, like in Russia, the lived experience is worse than what they have written in
exactly.
Right. Soraya in the live chat is asking, what about India? Any thoughts on India?
India, I can look up the location it is in our. And so it comes off fairly low down. It's coming in at 138 out of maybe 100 and so on. So I guess India is an unusual country in the sense that it has a fairly robust secular constitution, but the one thing that they do have is what's called personal laws. So when the British, when India became independent, it retained this thing called personal laws, and the way that means is that if you're a Hindu or if you're a Sikh, the law will treat you differently. So if you want to have a marriage or a divorce or so on, the state will require you to follow Hindu law or Sikh law, and so in that sense it doesn't have complete secularism. We've also seen the rise of the Hindutva movement with this kind of re-emergence of a Hindu nationalism, and that's been very much emboldened by the Prime Minister Modi, and so when I visited India in January.
Oh, we're gonna make so many people angry now. They're gonna be like fake news, anti-Hindu propaganda.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
I've noticed a lot of. There's so much. They're very sensitive about anything against India.
Okay.
But no, but it's fine. That's but
Can I say some positive things about India then, and maybe they won't be so upset with me?
okay, go on. Yes.
So I visited India, like I said, because we have very many organisations there in January, and I was, I mean, I'm not saying this just because of what you just said, but I was genuinely blown away by the movement in India. So there's an organisation called the Atheists Centre, which is based in South India in Tamil Nadu state. They have an amazing organisation where they run what do you call it, for children without parents, like an orphanage. They run women's. It's amazing. They run a women's. This is also another organisation called DK Dravida. I can't remember the exact name.
Wait,
but
the first one, they call it the Atheist Center. Is that
the Atheist Center? Yeah.
See, I tell you, they're not shying away. This is the Atheist Center. That's amazing. We need to find them and bring them and talk to them here. That's
yeah, definitely. I mean, I visited there in January because they had the World Atheist Conference in Tamil Nadu. And yeah, so I visited a university run by one of the non-religious organisations there, which I think they said they had trained 20,000 female engineering graduates and sent them out to the world. And this is an organisation which is run on an atheist, non-religious, humanist philosophy. They have politicians which would stand up and support them. They had a guy called...
Politicians supporting a group called the Atheist Center?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a guy called Periyar.
Wait, this is way ahead of United States even, if you have.
Oh yeah. The guy's name is Periyar, Periyar. He was like a social reformer in India many years ago. He was an atheist, and his motivation to become an atheist was around the caste system. So nice. He was. I'll just be honest here that my memory, I read a book about it, my memory is a bit thin, but as far as I understand it, he was born of a low caste upbringing, but he tried to kind of reject this idea of the caste system, and for him, at least, he thought that the caste system was so intrinsically linked to Hinduism.
Oh, it is. It's totally is. Anybody that tells you it's not is trying to as Hindu apologists. No. It's within. It's in their text. But oh yeah, that's fantastic. So India, it seems like it's going backwards in some senses, but also making progress in some other senses, right?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, it's difficult to characterize India because it's like 1/6 of humanity lives in India, so it's difficult to draw a sweeping conclusion of it, you know.
Yes, yeah, we're talking about a lot of people. So yeah, it's really hard. Like you're so right. We should talk about India as if it's just one thing. It's many. India is many things, and every region of it is kind of different from the rest of it, and there's so many different groups of people there. But okay, but elephant in the room right now. Why is Canada orange and United States is green? This is unacceptable.
So part of it would be, first of all, that the United States has, in theory, let's say before we get any further, one of the most robust secular freedom of expression proof Republican with a smaller constitutions in the world. It was founded by a group of men who valued Enlightenment values and so on and so forth. And although there was some references to a sort of deistic God, it was largely founded on the idea of the separation of church and state. So that gives a bedrock of protection for atheists. For example, if there's discrimination, so people often cite things like, some of the states have a bar on atheists taking office because there says something in their state constitution.
But that's against the country's constitution. So.
Exactly. So even where these things do exist, we're very confident that if they were challenged in the Supreme Court, they would be overturned. Now, having said that, again, the balance of the Supreme Court has obviously changed and looks set to maybe make some quite drastic changes to the way the US Constitution is interpreted, so that might be about to change. But what I would say is that the United States has a society and a legal structure where freedom of expression is one of the pinnacle values of the society, and I think people have access to legal resources through the Constitution and that heritage of freedom of expression that they can draw upon to protect their non-religious views. Canada has, well, now this is interesting again, because at the time of writing this report, Canada had a blasphemy law. Now, maybe you can update me about what's happened, because we just saw the news this morning that that has apparently been repealed.
Well, actually, in the live chat, Beach Price in the live chat is exactly asking that. She's saying when Canada gets rid of its blasphemy law, so it's apparently it's inevitable. So she's saying when the blasphemy when Canada gets rid of its blasphemy law, will the color of us for us change?
Yes, I think it will. I don't know. The colours are produced by some sort of smart computer thing, which I don't understand. But basically, that is a major,
that's a major thing. So we
violation.
It's so disgusting that we have blasphemy law in Canada. Like, come on. Yeah.
It's quite crazy. And
but has it ever been enforced?
I don't know. I'm trying to see if we have a note of any blasphemy laws.
Beach Press just confirmed that yes, the bill has passed. Just needs to be confirmed now. But even if that gets passed, we don't have a freedom of speech protected in a constitution like the United States has, right? That's something. Does any other country have that? Because that's something I'm very jealous of when it comes to the United States. Like,
I don't know off the top of my head if anybody has such a high, like a important constitutional thing like that.
Like,
I'm just,
even if I mean, this is something that, you know, people thought that we were fear mongering when we talking about some European countries when freedom of speech could get, you know, with this whole PC culture could threaten free speech. People are like, yeah, sure, no, it won't. And now we're saying that actually, yeah, it is. Like in the UK or in Sweden or in other countries, we're noticing that, yeah, or in Germany. These do have an impact on freedom of speech, and the government is getting more and more involved in deciding what speech is allowed. And so this barrier that United States has introduced to this in their constitution is so valuable. I mean, a lot of people that think that these things can't happen don't know how much history has changed in just this one generation ago, how the world looked, how much the world has changed in just one generation, right?
Yeah.
And they don't know how fast things can change again. So, yeah, I am a little bit scared when it comes, because these are like, and when I look at your map, there's only a few green spots on it, right? And the people that live in these green spots, they don't know how lucky they are and how rare it is to be able to say whatever the fuck they want. And I don't want to lose these green spots, you know what I mean? So, yeah, you were going to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, just to finish on the Canada one, I mean, I think that the blasphemy one is a very important one. There's also a lot of issues related to the religious funding and religious schools. So I've got reports up in front of me. So anybody who wants to read about the way that we've scored it, if they go onto freethoughreport.com, there's a page. You know, it's a long report for each country. It's kind of a Wikipedia style website where they can read about these reports. Now, again, you know, sort of to put a what do you call it? You know, like a disclaimer here. We are a relatively small organisation in global terms, and we do the very best we can to produce this data, but we do get it wrong sometimes. And if you spot something which is wrong or out of date, if you email us, there's emails here. We will update it, no problem. But just looking at the report overview, there's a lot of, for example, separation of schools to different faith schools and stuff like that. There was a rejection of putting atheism in an ethics course. I think that might have been in British Columbia. No, Quebec. Sorry.
They were putting atheism in an ethics course.
There was.
Isn't that a good thing to talk about?
Oh, no, yeah, sorry, it was rejected. So in Quebec, the mandatory course on ethics and religious cultures was supposed to give all primary and secondary school children an understanding of the main religions. However, the term atheist was deemed too negative to be included in the course. So there's a whole bunch of things like this. Now, some of them might be out of date, but basically...
Quebec is supposed to be our most secular province. What the hell happened there? Why?
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
And So there's lots of little bits like this, but one of the big ones would be the blasphemy law. So once this bill has been approved and ratified and so on, I think that there'll be a major shift. And one of the other things I want to say is, in terms of the scoring, you're right to say that Canada has come a lot further down the list than the United States. But if you think about it this way, imagine along a bar chart, you have the best countries, so that's countries like Belgium, the Netherlands, Taiwan. They're at one end, and then along the horizontal axis at the other end, you have Saudi Arabia and so on and so forth. The rate at which these countries get worse than each other isn't a single line, so it's not fair to say that Canada is twice as bad as Belgium because it comes halfway along the list. The increase in severity is much more like a what do you call this curve? Exponential?
Algorithm.
Yeah, it's a sort of algorithmic scale. So, for example, Saudi Arabia, if you say Canada's in the middle of this list, Belgium is at the start and Saudi Arabia is at the end. It's not fair to say that Canada is half as bad as Saudi Arabia. Right. It's Saudi Arabia is so much more worse, but it just.
Right.
Sorry.
No, go on. Sorry.
Just because we have to put everybody in a list in a linear fashion, it just sort of bunches up like that.
That makes sense. For the people that want to find this, look at this map and look at the report. The website is freethoughtreport.com. Freethoughtreport.com. Can you mention the best countries on this list? Also, the top 5 or something, whatever.
So the top 5 countries we have on this list are Belgium, the Netherlands. Taiwan, which often comes out as an unusual one for people, France, and Japan. So I think Belgium, the Netherlands, France, most people would sort of think, yeah, that makes sense.
Sweden is really high up there as well, but there's some stuff that is happening recently that might change things. Is that not the case?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, there's also a difficult thing in this report that we have to balance, which is, so, for example, the rhetoric in the United States, let's say, about atheists and humanists. So, for example, we have a president of the United States who's obviously very clearly aligned himself with the evangelical right. He has, there's this thing called the Johnson Amendment, which, if it passes, will allow religious organizations to become more active in lobbying in politics and so on and so forth. So, that will have a massive effect on women's rights, on gay rights, on a whole bunch of stuff that's not going to be good. However, and so a lot of people would say to us that we should therefore lower the score of the United States because the situation is kind of getting worse for atheists. But the difficult thing is that's not limiting the legal protections for atheists and humanists. It's just emboldening the opposition, and we constantly have to get that balance right between because your enemy is becoming stronger, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're being persecuted. It just means, do you know what I mean? So, but then at the same time, it's also not fair to pretend that that's not happening. So we're trying to find a way to kind of to temper the report with this report from the sort of on the ground effect.
Yeah, it seems very complicated. So actually, let me just, before I ask my next question, read some of the live chat, because Moose Gal mentioned something, and then Renzo, where is it? Sorry. Okay, so yeah, Beach mentioned that overwhelming vote to remove the blasphemy law. So bill was passed. It was enforced once, but failed, I think. By the way, people in the Facebook live chat, if you want your comments to show up on the screen, hop over to YouTube, because this is the YouTube live chat that shows up on the screen. And then let me see. I love the work that the Atheist Republic does. I have one more. Okay, Renzo is saying, in the Netherlands, Article 7 of the Constitution explicitly protects freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Wow, so they have something kind of like in the US. That's amazing. That's great. Renzo also saying, I think most European constitutions have this protection, but I'm not 100% sure. Freedom of speech is also codified in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. Okay. One thing else I wanted to mention that I forgot, I guess. Wait, where is it? Okay, so yeah. Oh, here's what I want to ask. Do you think this whole immigration from Islamic countries to Europe, the rise of immigrants, and the government and the reaction to that, and also the government trying to control what people say in response to that, it has or is going to limit free speech in a lot of European countries?
That's an interesting question. I think in terms of immigration, it's obviously been a very difficult issue. I mean, so I'm in Britain here in London, and if anybody has been following any news about what's been happening in our country, I've not seen the news in an hour, so it could be a completely different situation. But we're obviously going through a political crisis at the moment with what's happening with Brexit.
Right.
And everybody in this country is very clear that the issue around Brexit was prompted by fears around immigration. And I don't think that was necessarily related directly to sort of Muslim country immigration, but immigration obviously within Europe, with it being an open border in the European Union. I don't know. I mean, I think it would be wrong not to sort of acknowledge that there has been these anxieties. Whether they're founded, on reality, I'm not entirely sure. One of the big issues that we try to raise in Europe with immigration is the way that European immigration officials treat everybody as if they're Muslims. So if you come from Syria or the Middle East, the immigration officials have this kind of train system where you'll be put into, if your asylum is granted, you'll be put into a sort of refugee house where you'll be housed with a bunch of other people who will be Muslims. You'll be introduced to the local imam and the mosque, and people will treat you almost in quite a colonial fashion, like you are a Muslim. And for many of the people who come to Europe because they want to escape Islam and high control religion, because they might be gay, they might be an atheist, they might be just sick of living in a religious society, they get kind of swept up, and I think that's a big problem.
I actually know this woman that escaped from Saudi Arabia, ex-Muslim atheist. Her name is Rana Ahmad. She's amazing. And when she ran away, she was put into with other refugees, and they were spreading they were sending the Quran and everything. And she kept on telling them that she doesn't want it. And I don't know the exact details, but at some point she got so tired of people trying to give her the Quran, and she went and wrote a note or something and put it at the door saying fuck your Quran. And then the refugee people there were so scared, they took her somewhere. They were like, please don't do this, you're gonna start an internal fight. but she was like, I don't want anything Islamic in my life, this is why I ran away. Get this out of my face. But yeah, I mean, however, we have to acknowledge most of the people that are coming from there are still Muslim, though, right?
I would imagine so. I mean, I certainly would imagine so.
But that doesn't mean, I mean, obviously, but we shouldn't. But I do think. Do you think it's unfair to prioritize the? I don't think it's unfair to. I think it's like if there are atheists that are running out of Islamic countries, especially because they're running away because they're atheists, I think they need to be prioritized over other immigrants. Do you think that's fair?
I wouldn't use the word prioritize, because there's a whole bunch of kind of things that would make people vulnerable, so whether they're gay, whether they have disabilities and so on. So, but definitely I think it should be one of the factors that they take into consideration. So, for example, one of the things that we did on this point was there's a thing called the European External Action Service, which for the European Union is like the sort of foreign office, the outward facing organisation. So they have embassies and stuff like that. We actually went to Brussels to train them on recognising the rights of atheists and non-religious people, in particular to looking at claims of asylum and trying to help people who are in trouble. So I definitely think that we need to realise that this is a genuine thing. And there's been big cases in the United Kingdom and different European countries. That the Netherlands have had a lot of, which I think might be where Rana is, but they've had a lot of success in getting asylum status for atheist refugees, non-religious refugees.
There's a group in Germany specifically trying to help ex-Muslim refugees. I'm trying to find their name. I can't find them, but I'm going to try to bring them on Atheist Republic. But I think that's something that needs a lot of help.
Yeah.
But last question is, how can we help your organization, and how can Atheist is there anything that we could do together? Like Atheist Republic has a lot of followers, and you know we have a huge audience, we have a big global community, but you guys have so much legal structure and a lot of more resources that we could ever ask for. So is there any way we could like bring this together and help work together and do anything that could help you what you're doing?
I definitely would like to work together with Atheist Republic. I mean, one of the things that we want to get a lot better at is that we have a structure where our members are organisations, and the organisations can be a few volunteers running local meetups up to a professional organisation with its own office and 100 staff. Like we have a very broad spectrum. Something that we want to do more of, though, is to work with people informally where they're in countries where organisations are not an option. So for example, people in South Asia or the Middle East who they are yearning to be part of this non-religious movement, but they're not able to set up an organisation and to have a constitution and all that kind of stuff. But they want to be part of the conversation. They want to be able to tell their story. They want to come and speak at the United Nations, or they want to come and write letters for us and stuff like that. And I think that's one thing we can do together, because we don't have obviously the reach of Atheist Republic into people and all around the world. But
that's amazing. Yeah, go on.
And I think that's one thing that we can offer is, like we want to hear, and also for things like the Freedom of Thought report, so I'm not trying to be arrogant here, but we work very hard on that report, and it's we launched it this year at the European Parliament and the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York. And we had the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief talking about blasphemy rights, talking about how atheist and humanist activists are some of the worst targeted human rights defenders in the world. So we're able to achieve great things from that. But if we can get more testimony, more experience, more input from people around the world to know what's going on, because at the very beginning, you were asking me about why don't people take the challenges faced by atheists seriously, and part of it is because they are invisible. Because in many countries, we simply don't exist. We don't have legal status and so on. And through things like the Freedom of Thought report, statements at United Nations and different campaigns and stuff, we need to be open about the fact that this non-religious community exists. And I think that's another thing that you guys have been very successful at doing is promoting this idea that there is a global community, and that there is these things that unite us, and the reason that you might be a lucky atheist in Belgium, but it's all the more reason that you should support unlucky atheists in Pakistan, and right. Things like that.
Yeah. So when you say people coming with giving testimony and stuff, I mean, is this like people from like Pakistan, Bangladesh that are not in Pakistan or Bangladesh anymore? Because I can't imagine somebody from Pakistan coming and giving a testimony for atheists and then going back to Pakistan. Yeah. We have had people come from surprising countries to come and give testimony for us. But yeah, obviously security always comes paramount, but we can do things like we can take statements from people, we can ask people to do some research for us. So for example, one of the things that we have difficulty getting is on the ground testimony about, the law in Malaysia says one thing, but what is the experience of it, in right. That kind of level of detail. One other thing I was going to say was, I don't know if this is something that specifically our two organisations can do together, but one big problem that I foresee
from my point of view, which I just sort of want to talk about it because, you know, there might be people listening to this that can help us solve it. But one of the problems I think, and to some extent it's a hidden problem, is one of the things that we do at the IHEU is we try to apply for development grants. You know, so we apply to US aid, to the European Union Aid Development Agency to try and get money to give to atheist, humanist, non-religious advocacy organisations. So in the past, we've been able to fund anti-witchcraft campaigns in Africa and a whole bunch of stuff. We arranged an anti-Dalit, anti-caste discrimination conference in London, I think it was, in 2009. So we've done a lot of this kind of work. Increasingly over the past few years, what I've seen is a type of focus on faith and religious organisations to deliver development aid, and this is what I meant when I mentioned earlier on about what did I call it again? Colonialism. There's this very colonial attitude. I think it comes from a sort of postmodernist view of group identity, and it kind of worries me. It goes something like this. And I've had people say this to me at a conference. They said, okay, Gary, we've heard your presentation. It's very interesting to hear about the situation for atheists and humanists. But of course, you don't get atheists and humanists in Africa because religion is very important to African people. And therefore, when we do development aid in Africa, we have to work with religious people because that's the only way that the projects will get respect and funding and so on. And, you know, I'm sitting there, you know, we have people from Africa on our board. We have like 15 organizations in Africa that are members of ours. You know, we have a whole flourishing African humanist secular movement.
And atheist groups. We have a lot of Kenyan and Nigerian. We have atheist groups. Yeah.
That's right. And we had, I think, we sponsored like 20 students to go to the Nigerian Atheist Conference this year. You know,
right.
So I know that's bullshit, right?
Yeah, that's
but what worries me is that in these universities in Europe and North Africa, people are writing books about the need to focus on religion as an actor of change and religion as a way of delivering development aid. And we've actually seen that some of the what they call proposals for funding that are coming from these governments are now saying it's really important that you work with the churches and the religious groups to deliver these programs. And we are not an academic institute. You know, we do work with some academics, but we don't have the resources to be able to, you know, write books about the importance of non-religious people, but in this specific development aid project. But I just put that out there if anybody has any ideas or if anybody works in that area, because you know, I think it's the type of thing that I think if it goes unchecked, the consequences of this kind of narrative of focusing on religious development could be quite bad.
Where can people reach you with their suggestions?
I mean, if you go into the IHEU.org or just Google us, the International Humanist and Ethical Union, you know, we're very easy to get in touch with. And
in the YouTube version and the podcast version of this, there's the links are in the description. So with regards to the testimonies, what if we try to find a way at Atheist Republic for people to send us video submissions, and then we send you guys the video submissions of people, and if anybody is unsafe, they could just, you know, block their face or record them from themselves from just showing their back of their head or whatever. They could pixelate it or whatever, and we could collect those and send you a whole bunch of videos of people giving their testimonies. Would that be helpful?
That would be helpful, yeah. And you know, we're able to talk to people on WhatsApp and Signal and things like that, you know, to make sure that safety is a big concern, obviously. And I think maybe you and I can have some chats offline as well about ways that we can work together to make sure that, you know, we're complementing each other and to see what else we can do together that would benefit what we're trying to do, you know. And I think, I guess, we're all aiming for the same thing here in different tactics and different approaches, but we're all aiming towards that same thing, the world where we all have our human rights respected and so on and so forth. And
right. And just where would this be shown, these video submissions?
So, I mean, I'm just thinking initially about information for us. So, for example, we like to. There's a thing at the United Nations called the UPR, which stands for Universal Periodic Review, and this is where every country in the world gets scrutinised by other countries about their human rights record. And one thing we try to do through that UPR is to highlight issues where there's been discrimination against non-religious people, or any of the issues related to that. And the more evidence we have about things that are happening, the more we're able to put the finger on governments.
That's amazing. And, okay. Yeah. Wow, you guys are doing the Lord's work. I'm just gonna really quickly read some of the comments that I forgot to read on the live chat, and then so one comment I forgot to read is somebody is asking, do you have any advice for an atheist with Muslim family who are pro-Hezbollah and only tolerate my atheism because I am blood family? Oof. Wow. That's I don't know. Get at it. I don't know.
That's a very difficult one. We have on our website, if you go to IHEU.org. I'm just trying to find where, so if you go to our What We Do page, we have a resources section, and in that resources section there's a page called The Right to Apostasy in the World. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to coordinate all of the members we have around the world that do work with apostates groups, and this can be from the kind of basic thing. I say basic, but it's very important, of linking groups of apostates together as a support network, to other things like doing training and counselling sessions and so on. So you can check that out, and that might be a way of you at least being able to get in touch with other people who are in a similar situation. But yeah, I mean, there's a group that we have here in the UK called Faith to Faithless, and they've done.
Yes. They're amazing.
Yeah, you know them?
Imtiaz, yeah. Oh, he's awesome. And yeah.
They've done some really amazing work with, people from a whole bunch of different sort of high control religions to try and help people through the apostasy journey.
One other thing, I don't know. This one I suggest you do, if you're still listening, go to atheistrepublic.com as well, and please leave a voicemail. There's a green button right on our homepage, and just like if it's safe for you to ask for help and let people know what your situation is, like just go to our website atheistrepublic.com, press the green button and leave a voicemail. You could leave it, you could put your email, you could not, and if you don't want to, you could not put anything there. But just that's one resource. Last thing is Beach Price is saying, so cool, Atheist Republic and IHEU together. Yes. All right, so that's good. Anyways, thank you so much. Again, one last time, where can people find you?
So they can find us if you just Google International Humanist and Ethical Union, IHEU.org. And yeah, like I say, we'll be rebranding to a new name in January. So hopefully you and I can continue the conversation, and maybe we can even do another one of these next year, and we can have our nice new name. Make sure you do a redirect from the old website to the new one. Yeah. Okay, definitely. Great. So thank you so much for your time. This was very valuable, and we're going to continue having discussion. This is why I actually called this, I titled it part 1, because I want this to be a discussion that we keep having. Wonderful. Anyways, okay, so thank you everybody in the live chat. Uday, Casey Atheist, Beej, Christy, Jim, if you're still there. On Facebook live chat as well. You guys are awesome. Thank you guys. Love you all, and see you again soon.